Okay, okay, okay. Um, okay, colleagues. Um, Greetings and welcome back. We are supposed to talk about Clausewitz today, which is a big problem. Um, well, I mean, let me say a couple things immediately. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert on Clausewitz, and I kind of tried my best to come up with at least some kind of a general idea on what to say about Clausewitz, but I'm not very satisfied with what I have to say. So we will have a formal lecture on Clausewitz. In general, from the standpoint of like the policy of the University of London, I think that kind of my general recommendation is going to be, unless you're sure what you're doing, probably don't take Clausewitz, because maybe I'm not the best person to explain Clausewitz to you. So, what do I suggest? What is my general suggestion? My general suggestion is the following. My general suggestion is for today, I would recommend that you watch my lecture on Hegel and then watch my lecture on Marx. And this will set us up for discussing Lenin and Mao next time. And so Paul Kelly, in general, just wants us to jump into Lenin and Mao. I think that that's counterproductive. I think it's much better for us to have a good grip on Hegel and Marx, because this would, set a certain kind of scene to understanding the background for Lenin and Mao's ideas. I feel that in an, I'm not an expert on either Lenin or Mao. That's another problem. But I do feel that the Marxist tradition is valuable, and I have a suspicion. It's very important. This is not an accusation on my part, but really a suspicion that both Lenin and Mao could be misrepresenting important aspects of the Marxist tradition. And so, in order for us to be aware of that, I feel that it's good to dwell within the Marxist tradition. And so, basically, the two lectures that I have posted, the lectures on Hegel and on Marx, give us a good background, allow us to understand what the Marxist tradition is about. And the two lectures I have are, it's like, even though the lecture on Hegel is on Hegel, really I am explaining Hegel with a view to explaining Marx. And then kind of sort of, I feel that there's a very important common ground between Hegel and Marx. And so what I do in the lecture is I lay out the basic ideas of Hegel's philosophical project, and then kind of by contrast with that, comparing with that, I talk about the Marxist project. So again, this is my general recommendation. Now, I promise to give a lecture on Clausewitz, and I will try in some form to lay out at least some of the ideas, because I think, he's there in the syllabus and it's valuable to try to wrestle with Clausewitz. It's not like with Augustine, whom I'm very happy to just banish from the course. With Clausewitz, I feel, we need at least, to give some kind of an attempt. But within the given circumstances, and it's like, well, when I heard in December I'm going to have to teach this new course, I feel that I've overestimated my strength. I thought I would be able to prepare decent lectures on Machiavelli and like on all the philosophers I've never taught before, properly speaking. And it's like I feel that my Thucydides is okay, passable. It's like Thucydides not too bad. Machiavelli difficult, but doable. Some progress. Hobbes and Rousseau are, no problem. Hobbes and Rousseau are, I think, we have behind our belts. So it's like, so far, Thucydides, Hobbes, and Rousseau would be my first choice for the University of London. And then, like Augustine, I just, it's like, no, Augustine is banished. And with respect to Clausewitz, I'm unsure. I'm unsure about the kind of lecture I'll be able to give. And likewise, unfortunately, I will be kind of pessimistic. I feel sort of right now I am quite pessimistic about the prospects of me giving a proper lecture on Lenin and Mao. And then Carl Schmitt. Carl Schmitt is hard. Again, I will definitely try, but I'm not super optimistic about what I'll be able to accomplish with Carl Schmitt. And likewise John Rawls. I mean, I've taught Rawls before, but I do feel that he's a productive and an interesting thinker. But like in general, it's like I disagree with Rawls. I feel too much to be able to give a fair hearing to Rawls. So kind of moving forward in terms of our exam strategy, you need to focus on the thinkers. I think that the sort of the thinkers that I'm going to be most able to help you with are going to be Thucydides, Machiavelli to a lesser extent, of course Hobbes and Rousseau. And then with the other thinkers, we'll see. But at the same time, if there's a thinker that you like, I mean, I have access to Paul Kelly. You have access to Paul Kelly. The book has only just been published, so feel free to take a look at that. Incidentally, Paul Kelly's presentation of his book is also available, and maybe I should post a link to Paul Kelly's book right now. I wonder if I have it somewhere close at hand. Honestly, I haven't had a chance to watch it because my schedule is just a bit crazy these days, which is not necessarily a very good excuse or anything like that. But but it's there. So maybe you'll find it instructive. I do hope I will get around to giving it a watch. Some students who saw it said that there was at least there were some interesting ideas there, but that's kind of something by way of general introduction. And now here goes absolutely nothing. We're gonna try to deal with Clausewitz at least in some preliminary way. So. This is work in progress. Clausewitz is a new philosopher for you. He's a new philosopher for me. We're in this together. We're trying to deal with this together at the same time. So, I suppose let me try to get some ideas on the board. So, kind of the most important, I would imagine, the most famous statement of Clausewitz is that war is continuation of policy by other means. War is continuation of policy by other means. And, let's keep this in mind. This is something to keep in mind. Very famously, Foucault inverts the statement and says, no, it's actually politics as continuation of war by other means. So then kind of, I guess, explaining this sentence a bit further, Clausewitz says that the political object of war can be of two kinds, either to totally destroy the adversary or eliminate his existence as a state, or else to prescribe peace terms to him. And this is supposed to clarify this phrase, which is not necessarily very clear right now at the outset. I suppose let's maybe also talk about a very important concept in Clausewitz, and this is the concept of the Trinity. If you've never heard of Clausewitz, this is going to be. So anyway, so he says, primacy of policy determining the object of war and the double nature of war as potentially both limited and total that result from this. Yes, so also I suppose before we get to the Trinity, again, this idea that he is writing against the background of the success of the Napoleonic forces, and so Napoleon, right, and much of the military success of the French was owed to their political transformation. And well, anyway, maybe I'll make this the next slide. But let me finish with the trinity. So the remarkable trinity. So what we have is the directing policy of the government, the professional qualities of the army, and the attitude of the population. So this is kind of what is associated with so directing policy of the government, professional qualities of the army, and the attitude of the population. So this is the trinity. This is the trinity: the government, the army, and the population. Is this clear? I'm not sure. So let me maybe proceed a bit further and try to explain. Try to go back one step. So in terms of this political transformation of the French army. So we do have this idea. So French Revolution, which uniquely enables Napoleon, right? And okay, oops. So again, much of the military success of the French is owed to their political transformation, and again, yeah, okay, so let's look at this. So the French armies were able to successfully break. So yeah, it's like, again, this is something we mentioned. I think maybe again. So the government, the army, and the population. The French Revolution changes the attitude, the relationship between the government and the population. And so more specifically, we have this idea that, let's say, in the armies of Frederick the Great, there was this constant fear of desertion, that maybe half your army could just run away. And the general notion was that the soldiers in the army need to be more afraid of their own officers than they are afraid of the enemy. And this, this was the way war was conducted, but this was also deeply, highly limiting, right? And the idea was that finally now the French armies were able to successfully break all the military rules because the politicians discarded all the normal political economic constraints, the manpower. They depended not on highly trained and expensive regular troops, but on patriotic volunteers. So this is what the French Revolution enables us. Conscripts in unlimited quantities, whose services were virtually free. Right? The French troops foraged for themselves, so you could, unlike the troops of Frederick the Great, you could let these troops just run and find their own food and not be afraid that they deserted. If they deserted, well, first of all, they tended to not desert because they were patriotic volunteers. But even if they deserted, there were plenty more to take their place. Insufficiently trained for linear tactics in battle, they substituted a combination of free-firing skirmishers and dense columns of attack to wear down and then overwhelm the defense. Hordes of self-sacrificing infantry. Okay, I guess this is less important. So, yeah. So this was a terrible instrument with which Napoleon conquered Europe, but was available only to a government that was prepared to pour out men and money without slant. So basically, supported by people who identified themselves with its objectives. So this is basically the French Revolution. So there had, in fact, to be a nation. So nation is something that was created, right, and not just existing, right? So, and here's this idea of national emancipation. not like out of the kindness of the heart, not out of the progress, but kind of this realist idea that nations are invented because it is a more powerful, a more efficient way of organizing society. And also, so if you create, the nation now, people demand representation. So you have to overthrow monarchical institutions and create some kind of. So you have to overthrow the old monarchy, and you have to create a new form of legitimacy, which takes, the form of plebiscitary dictatorship. Anyway, and the catastrophe of Jena revealed not only that the Prussian army was no match for the French, but that the people, ruled by the Hohenzollern monarchy, this is the German monarchy, regarded the whole affair as no concern of theirs and observed the defeat of the royal troops with indifference. So this is the problem of lack of patriotism, and kind of you see this kind of idea of you cannot have a nation. You cannot have, like, in order to have like effective army, you need patriotism. And patriotism requires the ideas of the nation, let's say patriotism to the nation, and this requires some kind of democratic overthrow of the old monarchy. And this is what many people, politicians, philosophers of the time found unacceptable. So, and again, Clausewitz, no exception. He was a patriot of. He was, loyal to the Hohenzollern dynasty, to the dynasty. So he's not a Democrat. He's not a proponent of democracy in this sense. Okay. So let me go back to the idea of the Trinity, which is in many ways probably the most important idea in Clausewitz for our purposes. And so Paul Kelly actually talks about how, it's a good question whether there's one Trinity or two Trinities. So again, we have people who exemplify this primordial violence, hatred, and enmity. There's army, the play of chance probability within the creative spirit, within which creative spirit is free to roam, genius, and the government, the element of subordination, instrument of policy, which makes it subject to reason alone. Notice that this is not Plato. We're not talking about subordination, but we are not Platonic hierarchy, but more like Hegelian dialectic. By the way, Hegel and Clausewitz both died in the same year of cholera, during cholera epidemic. Depressing thought. And so the idea of the two trinities is that two trinities in a sense that, this first statement, so you talk about people, army, and government. In the second statement, we're talking about the passions, violence, chance of probability, and the subordination hierarchy. So are we talking about psychology, or are we talking about instruments? So the second statement links these distinctions. So are we talking about psychological forces, or are we talking about distinct institutions or bodies? So are we talking about hatred and violence, or are we talking about the people? Are we psychological forces or institutional forces? Are we talking about chance and probability, or are we talking about the army? Are we talking about subordination, or are we talking about the government? People ask, is there one trinity or is there two trinities? I guess. So another couple other ideas is we're talking about let's say, on friction and genius. So how should I put this? How should I characterize this? So some people talk about art of war as calculation, art of war as geometry. And Clausewitz disagrees with this. And this, other people say, you know, art of war is just this inscrutable genius. And for Clausewitz, not exactly, but also not exactly pure luck. So we're talking about some combination. And so friction just refers to unpredictability of the circumstances. Friction, you know, unpredictability, and this notion of the fog of war, right? Unpredictability and just opacity of the battlefield, how things are not necessarily clear. And so what you have is this, yes, so this kind of, the great general is both experience, insight, and luck. It's kind of combination. And you can think back to the Trinity, you know, plus, you know, keeping the Trinity in mind. And the Trinity are, you know, army, people, government. And there's a kind of complicated relationship between the three, right? So they don't necessarily, they ideally they should all help each other, but, you know, they don't necessarily. And there's this interesting phrase that he uses, and this is coup d'oeil, and this is the ability to sort of read the situation. So insight, which allows the great general to read the situation just at a glance. So coup d'oeil literally means strike of the eye. And this is kind of an insight that allows you to read the situation. So, yeah, okay, morale plays a very important role for Clausewitz, that, you know, very often victory at the on the battlefield is the moral victory, like the moral fiber of your troops is more important than, let's say, technology. So morale plays a very important role. And when we talk about friction, this is just the kind of the unpredictability. So let's just take this example. So he says, so in war, everything in war is simple, but the simplest things are very difficult. Countless minor incidents, the kind you can never really foresee, combined to the lower the general level of performance, so that one always falls short of the intended goal. The military machine is basically very simple and very easy to manage, but we should bear in mind that none of its components is of one piece. Each part is composed of individuals, every one of whom retains a potential of friction. Here's this phrase. Battalion is made up of individuals, the least important of whom may chance to delay things and sometimes make them go wrong. Yes, something like this. Okay, so just to maybe summarize this a bit more. So yeah, so Clausewitz is military theory in response to the French Revolution, idea of the rights of men and the citizens, subsequent wars for national liberation. So the concept of war in the place of genius and friction. So genius and friction. This aligns with the romantic critique of somebody like Kant or Hegel, right? Of crude Enlightenment rationalism. So we have this paradoxical trinity, the interplay between the people, the army, and the government, or maybe hatreds, chances, and reason. The dynamic forces that explain war and drive international relations. Okay, so and there's also this complicated discussion, which I don't want to go into right now, of the relation between offense and defense in military operations. Okay, and so oops. Yes, and the importance of so war as a recurring feature of human experience and not an aberration that arises solely from the failure of politics, but war as integral to politics. So Clausewitz criticizes this geometric approach. Something like this. This is just clarification of what I've been talking about. So we can also talk about Clausewitz on what is war. So Clausewitz, what is war? So Machiavelli talks about this history of Roman warfare and drill manuals for Hobbes. There's this kind of generalized individual violence, war of all against all, and for Clausewitz, war is related to war is normal, war is related to policy, and war is this trinity of kind of dialectical relationship between the government, the army, and the people. So Clausewitz also says that war is nothing but a duel on a larger scale, duel of wrestlers confront each other. War is thus an act of force to compel the enemy to do our will. Violence and the risk of violence are the essence of war. Attempts to conduct conflict with a limitation of force are invitations to failure, not marks of civilization. So again, so war is a normal part of human condition. Okay, so Clausewitz does not acknowledge a higher law. He warns that the war is never final. There's potentially no limit to the amount of force. Again, this, total war, potential for total war and total mobilization, especially after the French Revolution. Um, yes. Okay, so force and violence have roots in fundamental enmity, most associated with the idea of the people. So people within the trinity of, again, people, army, and the state. So, so Clausewitz is against this naive pacifist cosmopolitanism. You know, war is normal in some sense, normal and expected. Um, okay. Okay, and Clausewitz versus Hegel. Okay, so Clausewitz does not try to sanitize or you know, fit it with the higher teleological purpose the way Hegel does. Okay, so whoops, if we go back to friction and genius, okay, so the world is complex and unpredictable. We talk about, you know, intuition and not just a deductive science like a geometry. We talk about probability. Okay, and so important qualities of the general are these creativity and freedom. And again, compared to kind of romanticism of Kant or Hegel. But of course, this creativity is freedom, and freedom are like limited by the Trinity, right? Because the general finds himself with the army within the context of the army, but then there's also the people, the general versus the army, the general versus the people, the general versus the state. Right? And ideally, the general wants to kind of control all this and just say, do as I say, but the army will disobey. The people has its own, you know, dynamics, and the state has its own dynamics. Okay, so Clausewitz on reason, policy, and the state. So we're talking about this governmental bureaucracy. So war as continuation of policy, which means that, war, kind of ideally, or maybe like, war as limited, not necessarily complete destruction, but not complete destruction of the enemy, but reaching some sort of, attaining a political goal. Although there is a tendency of war to become total. Tendency of war after French Revolution and Napoleon to become total. So kind of war both has a limiting and unlimiting, limiting tendencies and kind of unlimited tendencies. Okay. So that's, I think, basically it. I'm not entirely sure if this is clear or if this is helpful, but this is, I guess, as far as my understanding of Clausewitz goes. So again, I would recommend you watch the lectures on Hegel and Marx and prepare Marx. But this is my best attempt at giving you Clausewitz. So I think we'll end here. Okay, colleagues, I think that's it from me. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, stay safe, take care, and I'll see you next time.